Can you take me back to Thanksgiving 2022, where this all began?
When those layoffs started coming, juxtaposed against the holidays, that really hurt. I was like, I need to do something about this to help.
Today I'm joined by someone who's helped nearly 4,000 people land jobs. With nearly 20 years of experience at Amazon, Goldman Sachs, and now Tencent, Amir brings deep insight into game industry trends. 150 applications per year until you found the work you're doing now. How is that possible?
Not right now doesn't mean not forever. I was never ever going to give up on games, but I also had a responsibility to take care of myself, have a job, have income, develop skills, and so forth.
We talk about how to break into the games industry, how helping others can come back in surprising ways, and how to protect your time while staying insanely generous.
No one's going to find out that you're an available candidate by accident. I've never gotten a job in my career through a cold application. Every job I've gotten was because of relationships built with other people. If you have any relationship whatsoever to the hiring manager or recruiter for a job that you could describe as meaningful, you are 15 to 20 times more likely to get the job than someone that has no relationship whatsoever.
From someone leading the most trusted games career community in games, this episode's guest and Director of Business Development at Tencent, Amir Satvat. Amir, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Harry. It's always good to spend time with a friend. Gonna be fun.
Likewise, man. We met first time in person at Gamescom last year. It was a bit surreal, right? Because we've kind of seen each other on LinkedIn, shared a few DMs, then you see each other in person. It's like, cool, you're here.
It's really funny. I tell people like this whole social media phenomenon, it reminds me of having dating myself as being over 40, but having pen pals. It's like having pen pals when we were kids, you know?
Exactly.
It's very exciting, yeah.
You build like one style of relationship, then you meet in person, and it's just like, this is what this feels like. And it was always interesting to see people in person after, engaged online. So for people at home, for those who don't know, Amir's helped nearly 4,000 people land jobs, and that's not even his job. So his job is actually Director of Business Development at Tencent, and he's built one of the biggest gaming community when it comes to helping people find their career in games. And I wanted to talk to him today about, finding a career in games, but also the person behind kind of this system, because he's doing two effectively from the outside, full-time gigs as a one person. So for the conversation today, I wanted to get into kind of like the truth about game careers. What are the odds? What is Amir seeing on the behind the scenes? But also kind of like the cost of doing this personally and how to kind of manage that. And then also building systems that scale beyond. Because I know you started this as a spreadsheet, but now you've got a whole Discord community. This all takes time. I'm looking to build my community in the future. I'll be very curious about that. And also about setting boundaries as well, because you've now become a public figure. And I've seen the post as well. Like, there's pros and cons with that. So digging into all of that. And I want to start off with your journey. So we're researching for this podcast. We were chatting before the pod. You were rejected 2,000 times over 15 years in the games industry. So I saw it and I was like, no. And then yes. So 150 applications per year until you found the work you're doing now at Tencent. Obviously, you were at Amazon Games before. So how is that possible? So please tell me what's happened there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, what the story of all of that is I grew up in a very tight-knit diaspora of a Persian community in the Northeast United States. Very close to my parents, only child, Persian community where they like made their own school to teach all the kids Farsi. And we called everybody aunt and uncle. You know how it is. In addition to my family, which was very large. Why am I mentioning this? I had two things that were clear to me that were very important to me by the time I was finishing high school, which is one, I never wanted to leave the East Coast and be away from my family. And the second one is, if at all possible, I wanted to work in games. Now, the problem is, I applied to many, many opportunities at many, many places. And there even were opportunities to get into games. But nobody would give me remote work. And at the time, as you know, there were a very finite number of companies in the East Coast of the US that did games, especially since I didn't live lower down near like Bethesda or any of those places. And the older I got, it became harder because once you're 10 years, 5 years out of work and you've never worked in games, Now all of a sudden they want you in a role that has 10 years of experience and you have zero. And so that is the main thrust of the story. And um, I think I'm so glad you asked it first, and it's so important because I think there is no right and wrong, right? You had a very interesting path to your career too. And I think the point is everybody needs to find what those bounds are that work for them and don't work for them.
Very interesting you said that last part, because the only reason I'm doing what I'm doing now is kind of similar to you. So, like, I was in recruitment before, and it started before the pandemic, like, or just after, but it was fully in person, just a bit hybrid, right? And my goal, I was in England, was make money, buy a house, move back to Cyprus. That was like, I'm not going to stay in England forever because all my family's here in Cyprus. And then 2 years go by, and there's something called golden handcuffs when you're in recruitment. It's like you've got all these deals that you're managing, and if you leave now, the kind of commission that we've already got is going to go out the window. And I'm just like drifting through life. And then essentially, I just had I wrote about this online, but one of my grandparents passed away, and I was like, okay, I need to go back home to Cyprus. So I literally just went to Cyprus. This was before the recruitment job, and I was like, okay, let me fix my military situation, fix that. But then I kind of told myself, yeah, I need to go back to Cyprus, but then did nothing. And then my other grandparent died, and I was like, okay, this is why am I here? I've not been had Christmas with family for like 7 years, and I just thought I need to go back. So I decided to hand in my notice with the plan to go and become a personal trainer in Cyprus. And then what ended up happening was I didn't want to be a personal trainer in Cyprus. I just wanted to go to Cyprus, and then I had a chat with my employer, and then we came up with remote work. So the only reason I kind of made it happen remotely with that business is because I just had that boundaries. Like I need to work remote from Cyprus. And then things started to happen. So I think similar to you, you've got that kind of requirement, and then you realize there's only a few ways it can work. I'm thinking, why did Tencent eventually, or sorry, was it Amazon Games your first games job?
Yes. So when I was at Amazon, I started out in AWS and then I was able to convince them with the help of Ethan Evans and a number of other cool people there, including my boss, Josh Dodson. My time at AWS had gone very, very well. And so my bosses there were very supportive. And they knew that I had the game's chops. And so they were like, come on, guys, like, just
Hmm,
trust us. Like he knows about it, give him a shot. And so and so Amazon was very good to me. And like, look, like businesses make decisions. It's not personal. But like at some point they decided they weren't going to have remote work. And again, that's why I had to make the change out of Amazon. And I was very fortunate that again, Tencent was supportive and allowed us to, be back home in Connecticut here with the family. So it ended up working out. But I realized it's becoming hard, a bit certainly harder these days.
for sure. Okay, interesting. So for people at home who've felt what you felt, right? You're talking thousands of rejections. Like, why wouldn't you stop at 100, 1,000, 1,500? Like, look, remote work just simply isn't going to happen, right? But you kept that going. Do you see that in people kind of sending application after application? Like, if I can be devil's advocate here, after 1,000 job rejections, I'll be like, wait a minute, is there something else that needs to change rather than sending more applications? So, like, when is too many applications more of a problem versus like the thing you need to do to get a job?
It's a really good question. So, again, what worked for me, I think an important part of it for me is I made a promise to myself. And that promise was I was never ever going to give up on games, but I also had a responsibility to take care of myself, have a job, have income, develop skills, and so forth. And so the entire time that this was happening, I had other work. I had work at investment banking first at Goldman Sachs. Then I was in graduate school for a while. And then a bunch of jobs of incremental increases in responsibility and so forth in first healthcare BD and strategy, then tech BD and strategy, then games BD and strategy. And so I have a strong point of view, and this is what I advocate to everybody in our community. Not right now doesn't mean not forever. But I also don't think, oh, I don't, and I don't want people to hear this, which is not what you're saying. But I don't want people to hear, oh, Amir applied to 2,000 jobs, and in the meantime, what didn't have a job? I was doing that while having a full time job, and I basically never stopped. And I would say that for some others, while this wasn't my skill set, because my primary skills are as a business person, for some people it's like, well, while having another job they develop a game or they develop their portfolio, and that completely works too. So uh, that's a mindset that I think is very reasonable.
Yeah, I want to speak on that because I was doing freelance recruitment where I was placing Unity developers into jobs. And the beauty of a recruiter is I'm kind of the filter to explain why this person's amazing. And if I had someone with a year career gap versus someone with everything the same, but that year career gap was changed with consultant, and he had just had a list of projects they worked on, even if they're personal, you can see how if you put these two side by side, we'll take the person who appears active. But I think what people don't realize is appearing active doesn't mean 40 hours a week. You could literally just be working on a personal project to a certain stage and just write independent Unity developer. You can package it in a certain way. And it's more about giving the person who's about to take a chance on you the feeling of safety that this person's not idle hands, they're moving and they're doing things. And that might mean, like we've seen with like Cave Bear games, that's a very good example where if you have time, you use a portion of it, not all of it, to show that you're actively and improving because, well, everyone else, that's who you're going up against. And someone's going to have that portfolio experience, right? So I think it's very important. It doesn't need to be 40 hours a week, but definitely you want to have activity. And hopefully, if it's related to the industry, like for you, it was business development work, it will definitely translate. And for an artist, for example, it could be, projects which aren't gaming related, but it's still art, for example. That's one point I want to make on that.
Yeah, no, 100%. And indeed, when that breakthrough came at 38, I assure you, if I hadn't been playing a few thousand games, learning about games, reading about them, being on forums, reading about video game history, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I treated it before the community even existed. I treated doing the games thing as like another job. Like, not like, oh, I'm just going to play Call of Duty. Because in my mind, I know this may sound a little bit silly, but like the way I kept my spirit up is I told myself every day, every week, this is the week you're going to break through. And if you're going to break through, what are you doing to break through? It's not just going to happen by like luck. And so I always had a regimented plan. Here's what I'm going to read. Here's what I'm going to play. I kept a spreadsheet of every game I played by all the things that I thought about it and so forth. And so I took it quite serious, to be honest with you.
Wow, wow, wow. Did not, because your love for games comes through. Sometimes it comes through so much, and I'm like, I don't know what to do with this information. Like, your love for Super Mario on LinkedIn is unmatched, right? It's like, we're talking dedicated videos with editing, and I think you're editing them as well. So that's like, this is prime time for Amir to
Yeah.
be, so like, it definitely comes through. And the fact that you documented it
Thank
as
you.
well, this obviously, again, when you're taking someone side by side, you're probably going to take Amir. The person clearly loves games. They're clearly going to put more of their after work time, brain energy on the thing because the passion's there. That's another big point. Like if you can show that you just absolutely love the industry and you think about it after hours as well, then compared to someone who is trying to cash a check, it's just a night and day difference.
No, thank you for saying that. And it's really, isn't it? It's about showing versus telling. Like
Mm,
something I also talk to people about all the time is like, look, it is great to say you're passionate about games. That is awesome, right? Definitely say that. But it's also like to your point, it's almost like you can't miss. It's just like pick demonstrable examples of how that passion manifests itself that you could hit somebody in the head with a rock and they'll be able to pick up on it. Yeah, for sure.
100%. This brings me to something I read earlier. So I have this daily battle where I see a post of someone saying they've given up on games or they've given up on searching or like this is my final post because I really want a job. And they have this line, I've done everything I can. And then I just, as I do, I'm like, okay, I have information this person doesn't. I did recruitment before, I might be able to help. So I go on their profile, and then the only thing they've posted over the last 3 months was about looking for a job. And when someone says they've done everything they can, I think they mean they've done every application they could. They've probably done networking or what have you, but then they're not showing it on LinkedIn. And I've had some real examples in my network where people from business development got laid off and they picked up a job after a few weeks. And I know for a fact LinkedIn helped them because they were already active. And then when they did apply for a job, I gave one person this advice: just treat it like business development. Get a list of all the people who could hire you and send them a nice video. And you got a few interviews and then got a job. But you can imagine the difference when you receive a video from someone and then you go check out who they are. They've been posting for months on the topic that they claim to be an expert in. So when someone says, I have done everything I can, I feel horrible because then this was the one I saw today. It had like 1,400 likes, like loads of comments saying best of luck. And I'm like, that's not what you needed. You just needed. I feel it's like I'm torn because I always stop myself from commenting because I'm like, someone's going to take this the wrong way. And I don't. I don't know if I should change that, but that's something where I don't know what to do, if I should do anything. But I don't know if you've seen that in the community where someone says they've done everything, but at least from the outside, I'm like, but you haven't, what we said before, showed that you know what you're talking about. I don't know.
It's very interesting point. I mean, look, I struggle with this too because I know we're both very compassionate people also. Like, let me kind of build up to this and give you a really good response on this because I think this is a very, very important question. So, I've never gotten a job in my career through a cold application. Every job I've gotten, even my first job out of college, was because of relationships built with other people. And look, like my father was a physician. We came from a very comfortable family, and I'm very grateful to the world, to God, that I was in that situation. But nothing that I got was of some old boys or old women's network or some connections. My dad didn't know anybody in games. My mom didn't know anyone in tech, et cetera, et cetera. They were all relationships, both in tech, healthcare, games I built up from nothing. Now, relationships isn't the only piece of it. But when you say what you're saying, Harry, that is spot on, where my mind goes is everything in life to me is about um it's about brand and about visibility. And what I mean by this, I want to be very specific, is I like to say to people something like this, which is no one's going to find out that you're an available candidate like by accident. Um if I was a random recruiter or hiring manager and I was actually like, okay, today I want to figure out what person I should hire for this killer role. How is somebody going to hear about you? Well, if you make one big post that like goes viral, great. That's one touch point. But now what if you're posting whatever, like you said, 3 times a week? You're commenting on other people's stuff. You have a page, you have a YouTube, you have a TikTok, you have whatever. But the sensitivity part of it is this butts up against the fact that you and I know that percentages are just so low, and doing any of these things is so indefinite, right? It's like you could do all the social media stuff for like 3 years. And, events are so important too. Those obviously have a cost and are hard to go to, but they matter also in terms of exposure and meeting people. But even if you do all that stuff, it's not some like one-to-one relationship. It's just much more amorphous than that. But what I do know is every person has some predisposed chance to getting a job. And I know this because of data. Unfortunately, if you're a 5 to 15 year veteran of the games industry, you by far have the highest chances. If you're an early career person with no experience, you just have very, very tough odds. And so, what I've really tried to stress to people is instead of thinking about it, oh, Amir, I did what you said, but I didn't get a job. That's not how it works. It's what are your odds of getting the job doing those things versus not doing those things. And if you do those things, the odds are going to be much higher, but they are still very low odds, which is why you also need to look at non-games things.
Also, I found when you have non-games things, or better put, like an income, that's a massive mental energy. That's like the brain. If it's a garage, it's not cluttered with how to eat. It's like, okay, that is done. Now I have this certain amount of energy and time, which will dedicate to the job hunt or so on. That will make a huge difference. And also, I want to be clear, because I do this for a living, like LinkedIn posts, at the start, it's brutal, but it doesn't have to be. Like once or twice a week. We're not talking about full-time job here. And to your point, Amir, I come from this from a business development, and we do a lot of outreach. And the advice I keep giving to people when people have asked me, like, okay, how would I find a job? What I found is a lot of them do the applications, 10 or 20, and then they try to network, and then it's done. I'm like, okay, cool. But then we understand the actual numbers here. I've actually done this recommendation, and maybe I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to say it. I basically say, go to Amir's profile, go to the spreadsheet of mentors, and find all the mentors which are in your discipline who are currently employed. Message all of them a very nice message saying, hey, I'm in this situation. I would love to have 15 minutes of your time to cover this. It will be a pleasure to chat to you. If not, good timing, no worries. You will probably get 30% of those people give you a nice reply. And about maybe one or two a month will probably say yes. Now, when you go on that call and you say, great, here's my current job hunt. Please tell me what are people actually looking for right now so I can better change my application. My point here is you need a feedback loop. Because if you do this for 2, 3 years and you're getting likes and impressions, that's not a feedback loop. That's an indication that more people are seeing the content, but are you influencing anyone? You don't know. So you need to speak to the people who actually are people you want to influence, which in this case are people currently employed in your discipline. And an easy way to find that is using your spreadsheet. Because then you can get a feedback loop. And like, great. Can we have this chat in a month's time again? And I can show you what has changed. And that way, boom, now we've got a situation where you kind of have a coach who can tell you this is what we look for. If you change this, your portfolio link doesn't work, by the way. Like all this little stuff that you wouldn't really know because logistically it is not possible for a game studio, especially today, to give feedback. Because I've seen what it's like on the recruiter side. It's way too expensive. It's just not practical. So, like, to your point, having an income or anything, whatever is possible, to kind of occupy your mind and then spend the rest of the time kind of ticking away and improving metrics when it comes to like my job hunting ability. I feel like that is a more sustainable way of doing things.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you doing that. That's great advice that you're giving people. And, the point is, I often think something my parents taught to me is they taught to me to think about between alternate available options. Many times in life, you'd like options, but that's not actually what's on the table. And again, I say this out of great sympathy because it is messed up being out of work for a long time. At some point, it's hard to think straight. I understand all of this. But what does not exist in this environment is some elusive shortcut that somehow like I or you or other people aren't sharing with applicants that short circuits all of this. And in particular about relationship building. Even when I first started doing some of this work in late 2022, it still wasn't so crazy where like company X has a job. I could write them and be like, here are 5 applicants and whatever, BD who are looking. They'd be like, no problem, send them over. They might even tell me to send all 5 of them over to have a conversation, no problem. Now, and this has been true for quite some time, and I keep very careful track of this to respect people's preferences. I would say a huge percentage, if not all the people I know, are like, we just can't do that anymore. There's just so many applicants, so many inbounds that unless it's a very small sliver of like a few people, maybe like every few months, that like you have to see this person, we'll do informationals if we see them at an event. Of course, they're always free to reach out, but basically, there's a process. And then now the people who get the attention and can rise to the top, and I think this is a misnomer. I think a lot of people, again, think that's exclusively for some old boys or old girls club of only cronies who all know each other. And that is not true. But the way you get into that position isn't one email or 2 emails and being like, hey, how are you? Building that kind of relationship where you get on, rise up can be 1, 2, 3 years of content and relationship building. When you say that to people, they're like, well, what are you telling me? I shouldn't get a job for 3 years. And I'm like, no, That's why you try to get anything you can to pay the bills while doing that at the same time. And I often say to them, if you can beat 17 years, which is what it took me, then you did it faster than I did.
Yeah, for sure. And the content thing as well, it's more like I did an interview way back when. It was with blanking on the name. It's horrible. But essentially, he had a spreadsheet and he wanted to get his first recruitment job. So he had all the people he had to speak to who were hiring recruiters. So it was the head of recruitment at EA, so on and so forth. And then he just made sure to follow up with them every few months. Not by saying, hey, you're still hiring. He's saying, hey, me again. This is what I've changed. This is what I've been working on. Is there any movement in this role? Because you told me to reach out after 3 or 6 months. And then wherever possible, if they manage to see them at an in-person event, happy days. But also, once they've connected on LinkedIn, if you come across as someone who's like not going to be chasing them down, they will read your message every couple months and probably have a very genuine consideration. Do we actually need this person's resources right now? And if they don't, they can probably tell you someone who may be interested. Because then you've plugged into 5 people's direct hiring needs, but then their friends' hiring needs, which is how I got a lot of my placements. So when I tried to place a Unity developer somewhere, my most fruitful way to do that near the end of kind of my recruitment career was ask all my Unity developers, like, hey, who do you know who would be good for this? Because now I've got the 20 top Unity developers, networks, thinking about it, and then boom. And I found that that's how a lot of hiring is done right now, especially in business development. Oh my God. So I've done a lot of, I'm going a bit of a tangent here, but I think it's very important. A lot of the service providers, when I ask them how they hire their business developer, it's literally through an internal network thing, thinking, oh, who do I know that'd be good for BD? Oh, this person will be good, cool. Like no job post, no nothing. And then that person literally doesn't know how to do BD, but they don't know that they don't know. And then after 6, 12 months, they then figure out and then they don't hire BD again. So there's been always this need for BD, but there's no public job post, there's no LinkedIn posts or so forth. So like a lot of the jobs, they call it the hidden job market, is there, but it's just not advertised.
It's true. And this stuff slices thinner than people think, also. Like, a thing I also tell people is they're like, oh, that's easy for you to say, Amir. You have like a very big following. And I'm like, I know I do. But one, I didn't start with that. 3 years ago, it was 4,000 people or something. But two, you don't need hundreds and hundreds of thousands of followers. You just need a few people in the sub area that you're in to care. Like, one example I often give people is, I have a very good friend, and I know you see a lot of her content too, Kat Craig, right? Kat's great. Kat does such great stuff in UX UI, and now she does have a much bigger following. But for a long time, even as she was growing her following, anybody I knew in UX or UI knew who Kat was, because like, you're not trying to be like Kim Kardashian. You just want people in your subfield to at least have heard about you more than someone else. And so it's not that you need to have Mr. Beast. You just need a little bit more of oomph than the next candidate.
Yeah, for sure. And funny fact, I've got the analytics of all the founders that we write for, like we ghostwrite for. And every time I look at like what's the competition, it's just a ghost town. There's no one who's like posting more than a couple times a month in a lot of these niches. So we're talking like I'm now one of one now. Because everyone might post, but it might be like an advert, like we're going to this conference. So they're not like actually posting content. So you'd be so surprised because on LinkedIn you only see what's posted. Like, but if you had like a heat map of like niches where there's not a lot of content, there's so few actual content creators in the games industry on LinkedIn. It's not even funny. Like there's so
That's
little
very
competition.
funny. That's very funny. Yeah.
Can you take me back to Thanksgiving 2022, where this all began? Like you were chatting to your wife, and then now that's the reason why we're speaking today because of that conversation. Could you take us back there?
Yeah, definitely. That few months brought together a lot of these threads that we've been talking about now. Certainly, the thread we've been talking about my own experience and challenging challenges getting into games, has always been top of mind for me. And before the cuts even happen, I had been thinking seriously for a few years of like some way of giving back, but I wasn't sure what that would be. And as you mentioned in our intro, I had figured that probably the first thing would be something Excel-y, data-y, that type of thing, because that was a skill set I had built up over some amount of time. And so when those layoffs started coming, and I saw people I knew getting laid off, and it was juxtaposed against the holidays, that really hurt. And like the image of imagining that, this is something I've carried through the whole way with the community, which is I really try, and I mean this sincerely. Sometimes I will just close my eyes for a little bit or when I have a quiet moment or I'm on the couch, and I try to imagine what other people in the community who are in various situations feel like. And that really lifts my energy to keep going if I ever feel tired or whatever. Anyway, I was like, I need to do something about this to help people. And so the initial goal was two things. One was to try to make a list of games jobs that was the most comprehensive, but a very specific sense in that a lot of places have and continue to have excellent listings of that info, but it's not apples to apples because the way they categorize and list jobs, it's not quite that easy to look at it single pane of glass. And so getting that comprehensive with over 3,000, 4,000 companies, standardizing and figuring out how to standardize the functions, that was a lot of work. And I think thankfully that helped a lot of people, and we continue to have that resource. And the second thing, which you teased earlier, was like, well, I wonder if I just ask the community who will sign up as a coach, how many people will we get? And I figured we get 5, 10, 50, whatever. And now I'm very proud to say we have 2,500 coaches across mentoring, CV, LinkedIn, art portfolios, mock interviews, and we also have a subgroup of 50 coaches now just on the Discord. And so all my credit and love to those people who provide that. And yeah, it's all just kept rolling forward. And I think what I love about it is in that Thanksgiving moment, where it started was getting the community's feedback about, like, let me not assume what you want to hear. You tell me what you need, and I'll build against that. And that is constantly changing. And like in 2022, 2023, when things weren't so terrible, and a lot of people hadn't done the basic stuff, like their CV, LinkedIn, their here's how to find the jobs. I think that was the most relevant. As time has gone on, I think more people are mastering that, at least certainly in games itself, which is why over time I've realized we have to constantly change. That's why now I put a big focus on how do you find non games work if you're in games. I put a lot of emphasis on all the data and analytics that we can uniquely collect because it flows through our community. I put a lot of emphasis on events where we've done, over 2,000 free tickets for people. So it's constantly evolving.
Yeah. I remember with the events as well when you first did that. I was like, boom. I had a few nice messages from people who I think it was it Gamescom the one I gave tickets for? I'm trying to remember. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, I think yeah, Gamescom. Yeah, and now we do official partners for GDC and for Gamescom, and yeah, no, it's been really good. And we've been trying to really make it more global because I know for a while it was a good feedback. Again, community feedback. We had too many events just in North America, just in California. I think thankfully we've been solving that a lot. Yeah.
Really cool. Sweet. I'm actually working on my own event business side. So I've done 10 events now. So I'll be sponsoring the karaoke at Gamescom, but I've been trying to formalize the whole event side. So I'm actually hiring my, by the time this podcast out, it will be it'll be a month later. So I can say this, but I'll be hiring my other brother and really dedicating on doing more gaming events. So I'm excited to kind of do that space in 2026. I'm wondering, you've been to a lot of events. Any tips for me as a new, soon to be kind of more event host, more formal?
I think too often people are focused on like they need to have an overly scripted program. I think one of the things I like already about the types of get togethers you do, which you can bring that same
Energy.
feeling to the events and energy is, I feel like the best events I've seen is you get interesting people in the room, you maybe have one or two speakers who say something interesting, and then you just leave everybody alone. And I know that's like not the most exciting thing because people are like, oh, we should have a band or we should have games or we should, I don't even know. I can make up all kinds of things. And I'm like, just keep it really simple. Interesting people want to talk and learn from one another. I think that's it.
Yeah, I'm working. I did one in Manchester. My idea was 15-minute talks only, and then one big round table. And then I did speed networking before the unofficial networking. And the feedback I got from that was speed networking was good. Should be have a louder mic or have a little buzzer so people can hear when they say swap. And people actually enjoyed the free form fireside chats more than the 15-minute talks, which is again like no agenda, just me chatting to someone like this, basically, like a public podcast. So I was thinking maybe do a couple of those, the speed networking, and then boom, now you have your whole evening. You can kind of have the networking and then go from there. So no, interesting.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Great. So I want to speak. How do you manage everything? So I've recently been on a productivity journey. Like I recently went from having meetings any time of the day. Now I only have them in the afternoons. I went from tracking my tasks. I I hated my tracker. Now I have a new tracker, and I'm managing to track my time. So yeah, how do you track your time? How do you go from one spreadsheet, but now you've got a full time job, you've got a Discord community, you've got all of that. So how do you like avoid burning out while doing all these things and new things?
So for me, what's always worked for me is two big things, which I always break into smaller things. One is every month or so, I used to do it a little bit more frequently when the community started, but once a month is about enough. I literally make an Excel grid of every day of the week and basically block out time. I assume that, some parts are easy, right? I know from like 8 to 9, you take the kids from school. I know work is probably from 9 to 6. We do 9 to 5, 9 to 5:30, do stuff for the children, and then back to work in the evening, etc. But where it gets more nuanced is trying to back into anything that isn't time with the children and work, exactly how much time everything takes, and then putting it into the workbook and actually making sure, at least at a conceptual level, knowing that life never works that cleanly, especially with children, have I taken on too much? So,
Mm.
to dive deeply into, besides the family and relationships and all that, which is the most important, and work after that. One, I made a decision when we started the Discord because initially just my friend Justin Williams, and then all the other lead mods and other mods as we built it out. I was like, I am going to trust the mods to run the entire show. So I don't do anything related to the Discord. The only thing that I do for the Discord is I obviously check in with them all the time. I'm briefed on anything that's important, and I occasionally make announcements for like major things. Otherwise, they handle that, and we're in very regular touch.
So you're like marketing as well. So you just market the Discord, then you have people managing it rather than the community manager.
Yeah, because I'm not a Discord expert, and I have enough trust in them that like I know we're very aligned on what community standards are, and so that's a big help. I also have a steering group, including our mods, but some other people who really help me. So like Desiree Rincon helps with all the branding and websites, and she's great. Um, I have Tim and Audrey who help us kind of like chiefs of staff. I have another person who helps with like comms and PR. And so like all of these things are there to help. As far as the brass tacks of the like the posting and the resources and so forth, I constantly ask myself, is what I'm producing so differentiated that it is worth my time to keep producing it entirely myself? For example, for the Games Jobs Workbook, I made a really good relationship with Mayank Grover and the Outscale people. I like Mayank very much and trust this team very much, and they do great work. So they were able to help me with a data pull to marry what I do with the Games Jobs Workbook for like weekly updates so that I could focus on doing what that original workbook was that you probably remember, like once every 1 to 2 months as like a reference. And I now can reconcile, it took a while, their workbook. Anyway, keeps product that's 95, 100% the same, saves a lot of time. Um, as time has gone by, I've entrusted some of the resources to other members of the team. For example, just to pick one example, Tim Wood does our LinkedIn premium trials now because I trust him to do it. And for the posting itself, and I think this is the most important part, and the messages, I get a lot of messages. So I easily get some weeks thousands of messages a week. I respond to every single person who writes, as long as they write me a personalized message and it's not, hey, like Sir Madam or some like spam garbage. Part of this is I have a number of form messages that are very polite, not one, I have like 15 of them. And I kind of categorize the messages and have gotten good at basically blasting through it and making sure I have something that I would consider a professional and respectful response to every person, especially because I know at this point, 80 to 90% of them ask the exact same questions. What are the resources? What can I do? And so forth. Finally, I really set bound. Oh, and I write 70, 80% of the content over the weekend in bursts. I do most of the work after I've finished work in the late evening and after the kids and my wife have gone to sleep. And I put boundaries on what I will and won't do. So I can't do individualized help for anybody. It's just not scalable. That's why we have a community. So I tell them I can. And this is a small one, but it matters. So I know best practice, which you do very well, by the way, is responding to anybody who comments on your posts. A long time ago, I decided I just don't have the time. So I put a like or an emote on every single comment so people know that I've read it, but I only put a comment rarely on something that I think that is important. So that's it. And I can manage my share of the community work in about 15 to 20 hours a week, which is a lot of work on top of a
Yeah,
job and 3 kids, but is the one main thing I do outside of my job and the children, and some time for games and personal life and whatever. It's manageable.
nice. There's a few things there. So it felt like you're not slow to find something that's repeatable, then find someone you trust, and then delegate.
Yes. It took me a long time to build that comfort, but now that I have it, I do. And I try to, because I'll give you, here's an example, Harry, right? This is a great, great example. Great question. I think job listings at this point are highly commoditized. Everybody has job listings everywhere. And I think if you're going to add something that's value additive, it has to be a pretty high bar of what you're going to do. So I feel like the cadence that I described of doing the old workbook about every 2 months and having something that is 95% as good that I can do with some help from my end and giving them the due credit that they deserve. I feel like that ROI versus time is something people often don't think about enough versus something like the community coaching, which I feel like is worth all the time because I actually think it's really differentiated and I don't think anybody else has anything quite like that.
And have you seen it working? Like, what's working right now in the community? Who are people? Who are the ones getting jobs? Have you seen any patterns?
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting. It's almost like going back to the question we had a little while ago, which is, um, so there's a, I don't like using the word fair, but I would say that what is happening for two reasons. Instead of fair, let's say factors people can control and factors people can't control. Um, there is no question that the data regularly shows those with 5 to 15 years experience are set to benefit the most in placing back into jobs in the industry. I think that I'm seeing hiring managers and recruiters become more cautious. And I think that it's probably to the loss of early career people and people who are very late in career, 45 plus, 50 plus, these types of things. And so there are things like that. And also, like if you happen to live in one of the major hubs where the hiring is, although that itself also is changing, you have an advantage compared to someone over just basic geography. So those are real factors that are hard to control. Here's some real factors, though, that you can control, which I would argue are as or even more important than those, which is the entire conversation you and I had about like, have you really tried everything?
Hmm.
I find that if I take, as best as I can, turn it into data, and I do this and talk to our community all the time, was this person like an engaged person? Do they have any social media presence? Do they have a LinkedIn profile that's filled out well and thoroughly? Do they engage in comments and posts? Do they go to events? As like an extra bonus, are they something that you or I or the average person would say is even like a top 500 influencer in games on any platform? These things are huge bonuses. And I even found this: if you have any relationship whatsoever to the hiring manager or recruiter for a job that you could describe as meaningful, you are 15 to 20 times more likely to get the job than someone that has no relationship whatsoever.
Which is crazy. What you just said, 15 to 20 times. And it's true. And I want to just touch on this a little bit. Like, there's a reason, because it's kind of hard to explain, but I think it's the word nepotism, right? Like, why does that exist? And I think there's a reason where if you're trying to hire someone, would you hire someone you don't know versus someone you do know? All things remained equal. Let's say, for this example, you hire someone you do know. Why is that happening? It's because you've kind of removed some of the risk involved in that this person probably is what they say they are. They haven't lied to me and they've worked with me or someone in the past and it was okay versus someone who there's a question mark. So with all things equal, what I found is that people misunderstand sometimes is you don't need to be like the brother to get this kind of check mark of approval. It's almost like, are you just a normal human being in the DMs? Have you met me in person? Have you sent a nice email? Was it personalized? Were you just spamming? Because then you now go into, this is a real person. Like they have some element of trust versus the person who is a question mark. And I find like that is massive. And it doesn't take a lot. It could take a referral. That's enough to be like, if someone's vouched for this person and I know this person who's vouched, that's a big difference. It's like it doesn't take heaven and earth to become this bucket.
No, definitely not. That's really great. And the paraphrase of what you said, a fun way of expressing this that Ethan Evans says all the time, which I really like, is he often, to your point, thinks of those imaginary two piles of like the whole applicant pile and the people who are going to get that phone screen to move on in the process. And he imagines a person hypothetically reading through that pile and seeing, for example, Ethan's CV and knowing him and looking at the picture and going, oh, Ethan. And it's like, literally to your point, even just recognizing the person at all and it not being like a negative connotation, that's like often enough to get you into the second pile. And it's like, I also think people think too much about jumping ahead 5 steps of like, am I going to get the job? And I'm like, just get to the loop and then you can worry about getting the job.
Yeah. Or even just like a reply. Like they might have recognized you and now given you more energy to give a reply or what have you. So you can understand and take that with you.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to get into here? I wanted to touch on boundaries a little because I feel like, actually, one point. Do you use any tools for your LinkedIn? Do you use any inbox management tools or anything, or are you just going raw LinkedIn traditional?
I do it raw,
You
all
do it,
raw.
doing it all raw. So much time you can save. I'm not talking about automation. I'm just talking about like just. I might show you after the call, but yeah, the fact that
No,
you've
I
done it
know.
raw
Well,
is
the
amazing.
reason, the only reason I didn't is I used to have one tool that helped just a little bit as like a third party thing, so that like queuing up messages and handling flow and so forth. And then I got my LinkedIn account got flagged for like a security
Yeah, yeah.
thing for being a bot, and it locked me out for like a week. And it sucked because it was a week when people needed help the most. And so that like really spooked me. So we can talk offline if there's suggestions. I always tell people I'll hear it out, but that really spooked me.
Yeah, yeah. I had it happen as well. It's more about profile actions I found, but I'm not talking automation. I'm just talking about making your UI a bit easier when it comes to the DMs. If you get 1,000 a week, it might make it a bit prettier. Cool, Amir. So in terms of, I wanted to touch on this. So you get some negativity. I've, funny enough, I have probably had like 4 or 5 negative things ever happen, And what I tend to have as a mantra is like block and see you later. That's kind of like my way of going through things. But it's interesting for the clients that are female that I've ghostwritten for. Oh my god, it's hard. Like they get hate. They get some weird hate. And it's like clearly not nice, and it just happens a bit more often where I can notice it. And I've seen you talk about it just from sheer volume, right? 100,000, 1% of 100,000 is still a lot of people. So I want to make this practical a little bit, maybe. So for people at home who are kind of scared of putting themselves out there because they might be afraid of what people will think about them, like you've posted despite what people have, like I've seen, like there are negative, there's negativity that comes your way, right? And that's a price that you ultimately have to pay. Like, kind of what's been your journey through that, and maybe any advice for anyone who's afraid of putting themselves out there.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough topic, and I think that let's be honest about it at the outset, right? If you do eventually achieve some size and scope, depending upon what type of content you provide, it is unlikely that you won't have some pretty hard bullets thrown your way that require a certain toughness to absorb. What I try to tell myself is, first and foremost, the reason I'm doing this stuff, as you know, not that there's anything wrong with this, isn't for money, although many people also make money on things they do and are very, very good people. But that's not the motivator. I don't do it to win like public acclaim. I don't do it to win a popularity contest. I do it because I want to help other people. And at the end of the day, nobody within with maybe like I can count on one hand in 3 years, people within the games community, who, at least to my knowledge, some people can say things anonymously, has ever said anything to me that was nasty. Even at the worst, where for like a few weeks, as you might remember after TGA, it was very nasty for a little while and it thankfully ended. 99% plus, 99.999% of people in our industry have always been very supportive and warm towards me. Many people have many reasons, and I could guess what some of these are, in my opinion, of why they behave this way. Some people see me having entered the industry very late, and they think there's some level of jealousy of why they're not getting notoriety or getting awards or stuff like that, even though that's not why I do it. Some people can't possibly fathom that somebody would do all these things just to try to be nice towards other people. There must be some other angle of something that someone is going to, or it's too good to be true. I think a lot of people have been burned in their lives, so they find that hard to believe. Some people have even told me, I don't know, but enough people have said this to me where I believe maybe it's a thing. Maybe it's because of the way I look. Maybe because my name's Amir instead of Adam. And like I'm of a different background. Maybe that's a triggering thing for some people. I don't know.
I want to speak on that, Amir. I think it lowers the threshold where someone would say something, because I've noticed that in my world with female versus male, for some reason, when it's a female, people are a lot more quick to say something negative. It's almost like there's less of a reason not to. I don't know how else to say it. So I wonder if it's a, yeah, it's a weird one. It's horrible, but I think there's something to it.
Yeah. And so it's tough. It's like, the rational part of me, and I've gotten better and better and better and better at this over 3 years, is like, again, 99.999% of everything is positive. It's wonderful. It's great. But it's tough. It's tough when, like, which, which you shouldn't do, by the way, people watching this, when you Google your name for some earnest reason, and there's still like residual things of people saying garbage about you or on YouTube or on Reddit or whatever it is. I particularly might say, like, I particularly don't appreciate the comments that were about how at TGA it was some shock that like I worked in the industry or like I had a job where I do, rather than being some like streamer or something like that, as if that matters for anything. Like, I've never worked in M&A, I've never laid anybody off personally. So it's just like I'm bringing up a grab bag of options for you in the audience to say, sometimes it's just garbage that like people are perpetuating things that are lies. Some of it I've even seen about our community, where I'm sure you've seen this as well, and you know otherwise. But people who are like, oh, it's just a spreadsheet. And all they do is they make one spreadsheet. And they don't have any idea how our community even works or like what we do. And so it's just like, that's life, man. Like, where you and I are doing it on social media, people treat each other 100 times worse in real situations in the world to each other's faces. Like we have genocide, we have like hatred in the world, we have all kinds of problems. Like at the end of the day, this stuff is just words and it's not going to hurt me. To be honest with you, the only times when I really actually care is when people say things about my family. And that's the type of thing that I report to the police and that I think is completely unacceptable. But anything else, you learn to get tougher, you focus on the mission, and you have a predictive matrix in your head of just blocking and moving on.
For sure. And I think you pointed to something there where you said it was less than 5 people who were like in the industry, and I think it's an important thing always to note. I had this conversation with someone who kind of got like their first hate message, like, who left it? Do you care about their opinion? Because then we usually see there's something wrong in their life or something, or is they might even just, we know they can't have the context. So like they have personified you as this thing which they already don't like, and they just put you in that bucket. Therefore, it doesn't really hold ground, like that negativity. So I think it's just important to, because it is hard, and it's actually one of the main objections. Like, what will people going to think when I post? Who am I to share this? I get this a lot. I'm like, what the hell? Like, you have the most cool story ever, and then they say like, yeah, I don't want to be cringe, and it's like, you are. You go on stage and you talk at these conferences, but they don't want to share it on LinkedIn. So it's a genuine fear that people have, and I think it's important to note that the people who think that, do we care? Do we care about that opinion?
Yeah, and it's a business too. Like the point is, and I don't mean this cynically, I'm just being this again, my honest opinion. The same way that like you have a business, the same way that my business on LinkedIn is running a community, some people their platform is based around basically picking people or topics and
Mm-hmm.
criticizing those things. And that's how they drive engagement and make their source of income. It kind of makes me sad that that's like the way it is, but that's the thing. And um I think the most important thing is that when people target you for these types of things, to not engage, because like that never goes the way you want. And so I've learned basically just to ignore everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree there, and I think there's some good advice for people who are worried about that. Like, to be honest, like, it is definitely, it exists, but it tends to be the people that it comes from. We don't let it affect us because of kind of where that feedback's coming from, so to speak. Alrighty, Amir, I want to ask you: is there anything from our conversation that you feel like you would want to spend a bit more time on? Anything for anyone listening who want to break into the industry, learn more about kind of what you do, that you want to kind of leave people with?
The only other thing I wanted to say that we had mentioned in pre conversation that's important, and I particularly want to mention this in this conversation with you, is that there's a point of something I often talk about that I think a small number of people maybe misunderstand. And I want to make sure everyone's crystal clear on it now, which is what we were talking about everybody doing as much as they can to put good back into the world and in the situations they're in. I emphasize for our community that we do this, as a second job that I do, for not doing it for pay. Because for our specific situation, for what I'm specifically doing, that's a model and setup that I believe is the right model for what we're doing. Many people that I know, like you, like friends I have, I'm picking things randomly off the top of my head. People at like Zebra Partners, which is a very well known PR and like communications firm. Many people I know who are recruiters, like Lizzie Mintis and so forth. And I could pick 10 more people. I have hundreds and hundreds of people top of mind for me who, Mayank Grover, who run for profit businesses, who in some cases are in nonprofits. Put that on the side for a second. Some people decide that their commitment is doing something like this as an entire full-time gig alongside their job, like me. For some people, it's just putting nice comments on people's posts to kind of lift them up or to give good advice on LinkedIn. I just want everyone to always ask themselves, for my situation and what I'm doing, and every person has a right to find what that is for their job and also their non job. Are you within the windows of whatever you can doing the most to be positive and uplifting and helping of other people and finding those windows? And I think you do a fantastic job of that. I think we have many, many friends on social media who do that as well. And I just wanted to take a minute to clarify for people that when I say these types of things or emphasize that we're like a zero profit community, even in like my tagline, that is not to suggest that is the one model. It is my encouragement to everybody to find the most positive within their model.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And hmm, it's funny you mentioned that. It got me thinking about when I started. I used to do a lot of live streams on LinkedIn Live. Now, just because the business has grown, I've not done them as much. And I've kind of thought, huh, because a lot of people quoted those live streams when I kind of helped them. Um, and they're technically, right, they're for free. Definitely helps the business. But to your point, the more because I'm just thinking with my current business, am I leaving anything on the table? And I always am. It's weird because like I can do more. I could do more podcasts. I could do more live streams. I could do more
Time's
events.
always time's always against us, but like you'll find the opportunities organically. Like for example, I would love when you start doing events to be like, I'm totally making up a number. 5 people at the event will be like unemployed people in the industry who are going to get to go to that event and enjoy it for
Yeah, so
free or
I've
something
done
like
that
that.
in an unspoken
Yeah.
way. It's almost like,
Yeah.
could I do more? It's it's tricky. It is tricky. Like
You know what would be really cool? You lean into this thing that we're doing. Again, these are all, to your point, these are all things that you've done, but it's all about just like all of us changing the
making them
dials a little
consistent,
bit.
right? Yeah.
Let's turn up the dial more on. This is what I'll leave as our fun challenge between the two of us, of which I'm still trying to push a number of things on this front, continuing to turn up that dial on how to find non-games work for gamers. I know I mentioned this like Captain Ahab with like the whale, but I'm like truly obsessed with this topic because I believe it's very, very important and is only going to grow in importance.
Do you have time? I've got 1 minute to speak on that. Can I?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
I just had this conversation on Sunday. So listen to this. I was at a christening on Sunday, and in Cyprus, when you do a christening, it's like a few hundred people. We all get a dinner, and I was with my auntie and her daughter, and they both need a job. So one of them was in childcare before, the other one hadn't had any other job apart from detailing cars with her husband. So they wanted just a normal job. And then they said, we just can't find a job. Like, do you know any jobs out there, Harry? Do you know what to do? And my grandfather said, look, can you help them find a job? So I was like, okay. I'm with my recruiter hat on. I was like, okay, what have we done so far? And they said, I need to earn this amount of money. I can't find anything. I'm like, okay. We got all the normal jobs in the area. So we got, waiter, all this stuff. Like, yeah, never done that before. I'm like, okay, what about barista? She's like, yeah, no one's going to trust me. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I move on to my cousin. She's done childcare before, and she did it as a part-time assistant over summer, but she was one of the best persons there. And then she said, yeah, I don't know, I want to do childcare. I'm like, okay, what have we done? It's like, yeah, I need a CV. I don't know if I need to do a course on it. I was like, have you checked? Like, no, but I don't have a laptop, so I can't do my CV. I'm like, okay. So then we zoomed out and we realized the current situation, the only two things that were stopping them from getting a job was find the laptop, get the CV, something, and then go and ask people. And then I asked my brother, who just left because he joined my business last year. It's like, hey, you used to work at a place called Edam's Yard. Are they hiring? It's like, actually, two people have left, and they would probably have you. I was like, great. So now the only thing you need to do now is get a CV and get a recommendation from the Midri, and then go in person. So long story short, because I'm starting to hire now, hiring is so time consuming. Like I'm hiring a writer. I didn't put a job post out it because I just asked a friend, and now I've got 20 people who are rating from a writing task from me. I'm never going to advertise that job. So when people say they struggle a lot to find work at, for example, fast food restaurants or what have you, if you want to guarantee a job, if you just go in person to like 20 of these, look sharp, and just say, hey, this is the work I've done. I'm going to show up on time. I'm going to do all of this. you're guaranteed, just guaranteed to get a conversation rather than just posting in the abyss. Because if you just catch someone at the right time, it's just a numbers game. So at least in my Cyprus community, like Edam's Yard's not going to be posting out job ads because she said, "Yeah, I've applied to every ad I saw." I'm like, there's like 4 ads online, but there's like so many businesses struggling for people right now. It's like
Yeah.
just go in person. It's basically my
It's
main
so
magic
funny.
tips for that.
I love that. Well, you know, it's interesting. I feel like the full circle of that, of everything we've been talking about today, is of course when the industry was smaller, and certainly when I started my career in 2004, and you had paper applications and you could just like show up to events, there was a lot of that. In fact, I didn't go to I, of course, wasn't even in the industry until 2019 or 2020, trying to say 2020. And I didn't go to GDC until, last year. But what a lot of people tell me is that before things got so crazy, you would just go to GDC and there'd be recruiters from all the companies. I don't know to what extent this is true or not. And they would take resumes and like ask about roles right there. Now, of course, that situation has changed. But if what I've heard about it is accurate, I feel like the way you try to dissolve that is all the stuff we've been talking about just trying to get yourself in front of people. It's not as quick, but like it's just about that motion repetitively. Yeah.
And to your point, Jagex, they make RuneScape. So at Develop Brighton, the only reason they were there was to show off their new game and hire. They had about 50 people at their booth, and they were spending all their time. We're talking about senior 15-year engineers, one like producer, the hiring manager. They were just giving everyone advice. Do this, apply on the website. Do this and apply on the website. Like they were just doing that. Like God bless them. They were doing that from like morning till night. And I asked them like, "Hey, is this what you wanted?" He's like, "Yes, it's exactly what I want." I'm like, great. So there are still some companies who are hiring who you can find in person. And the best part here is you're not looking for an interview. You're looking for feedback because then you take their feedback, you do exactly what they told you in that feedback, and then you come back if you're not already ready, which is always the best option. But the second option is they've given you feedback, you go and do it, and then like, great. The likelihood of you getting an interview is crazy good now. And it's very hard to say no to someone in person.
Oh, Harry, this was so much fun. Thank you very, very much. This is really, really nice and a really nice cast, and I really enjoyed it. Okay.
Thank you, Amir. How can people find you and the resources?
Yes. So to make things very simple, if ever in doubt, my full name, amirsatvat.com. AMIRSATV like Victor, AT.com, all one word. Everything that we do, from our LinkedIn to our Discord to my post to the website, it's all on the site. If any concerns with buttons and so forth, Harry has so kindly put it up there, and he'll scroll down to the bottom for you and show you that you can see all the lovely resources, a video that explains them all, organized by category with a one-page guide if you want even more detail. And then at the very bottom of every page, you'll see that we have, oh yes, and of course our resource library. And then you'll see LinkedIn, Discord, and YouTube. YouTube is fairly inoccasional for when I post something, so it's all right there. And like I would say, above all else, please just like engage with us. LinkedIn is kind of the glue that puts it all together with the content that I post every week, and then you won't miss out on it.
Yeah. I think just a second on how to get the most of this, definitely join the Discord because then at least you got people to talk to if you get stuck. And then the other thing is, I would start with obviously you now have a list, a very good list of a bunch of jobs, so you can then see what people are hiring. But then honestly, if you were how to get the most ROI for me is hit up those coaches, man. You got all those coaches. You just need one conversation, and that will change your life. At least for my personal life, like the last year, I've spent a lot on coaching. Every single one, they share this one little tip, but then it completely changes the business. So imagine that for a career as well. I never had that before. I just kind of lucked out by speaking to certain people at the right time, but I can imagine how useful that would be to, speak to a coach and then they could tell you something that changes your life.
Thank you so much.
Sweet. Alrighty. Everyone at home, if you listened this far, share it with a friend. That's my one ask. And goodbye, everyone.